Brian for Liberty. Thank you so much for stopping by today. I certainly do appreciate it. A couple of articles have caught my eye over the weekend, and I wanted to get a video out this morning to discuss some of those things. If you are new here or you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please do so. I'm going to be trying to get content out on a much more regular basis now that I've settled into the new home, and we've pretty much completed unpacking over the course of the weekend. So I'm going to have the time now to engage a little bit more actively, both in the comments section and in terms of getting content out on a timely basis. So I hope you'll take a minute to subscribe. I hope you'll like the content and share it. And like I said, I just want to go over a couple of quick articles here that kind of caught my eye over the course of the weekend. And the first one is really these NFAC protests taking place in Louisville. And I'm not 100% sure if you guys are familiar with NFAC. Essentially what it stands for is the Not Effing Around Coalition. This is a splinter group, I would say, off of the Black Lives Matter movement. They are overtly threatening violence, and they are armed protesters. In Louisville, it was approximately 350 protesters carrying AR-15s and long rifles, which I 100% support. And let me just say this. I love seeing the Black community expressing their Second Amendment rights. I love that. And I'm glad that they're out there doing that. And I'm glad that they're taking a stand against the state. I support all of that. So let me just be perfectly clear when I say this. And the fact of the matter is the fact that they don't have a race in the title of their organization, to me, makes them seem almost more inclusive than Black Lives Matter. But there's a couple of things that we should take away from this protest in Seattle. And first and foremost, a large contingent of Black Lives Matter supporters said of the Michigan protests, and if we all remember back a couple of months ago during the lockdown, there were armed protesters who were at the Michigan state capitol protesting the lockdown and exercising their Second Amendment rights. And there was a massive amount of criticism from the left, both from people like Trevor Noah and your Stephen Colbert types, to the mainstream news and social media outlets talking about how this would never be possible if these people were Black. This never would have happened. It wouldn't have been peaceful, so on and so forth, even though there were actually armed Blacks in that group as well. But this was 350 armed African Americans marching in Louisville under the protection of the police, and the protests were completely nonviolent. So it kind of destroys that argument that Black people wouldn't be free to exercise their Second Amendment rights in this country in a protest. And I think we should all be happy about that. Whether you agree with what they stand for or not, the idea that these folks can also freely exercise their Second Amendment should be viewed as a very positive sign for our country. So I was very happy about that. I'm not necessarily happy that they're threatening the state with outright violence. In regards to the Breonna Taylor murder, which is what they're out there protesting, the bottom line is they're saying they want results in 4 weeks. And the Attorney General in Louisville has told them that it's going to take approximately 4 months. The leader, Grandmaster Jay of this group, told the Attorney General and the mayor, you don't have 4 weeks. And if they come back in 4 weeks and they don't get the answers they want, they will burn this mother effer down. As a libertarian who opposes the state, it's hard for me. This starts to get very gray area. It starts to become very difficult to determine where we should stand on this. The bottom line is that an investigation is taking place and that laws do need to change. I oppose no-knock raids. I oppose the war on drugs. If we implement those things, then at the end of the day, the Breonna Taylor situation never happens. Asking for the arrest of the police, and I've done this before and I've spoken on it before, asking for the arrest of the officers involved is to me the equivalent of saying we're going to arrest an Air Force pilot for dropping a bomb that he was ordered to drop by his superiors based on intelligence that his superiors gave to him that ended up killing innocent civilians. To me, it's a very similar scenario. This cop was ordered to breach a door in the exercise of a no-knock warrant, and when they breached that door, they took fire. When they take fire, they are, of course, going to return fire, and that's how Breonna Taylor ended up dead. This was not an intentional homicide. This was just following orders. So when you use the just following orders, the immediate response is, well, yes, so were the SS officers in Nazi Germany. That's exactly where we go right away when we talk about this. But we have to ask ourselves, are we going to take this officer and put him in prison for what he did? And if so, fine. I'm not necessarily supporting that idea, but if so, then we better charge all the way up. Every single person involved in that case needs to be held criminally liable for what happened to Breonna Taylor then. And the officer's criminal consequences for this action should actually be the lowest. And as we go up that chain of command, the criminal consequences should become higher and higher and higher. And I think that's how we have to address these things, because we have to punish from the top down if we want to change policy, not from the bottom up. And right now, this whole movement, both Black Lives Matter and NFAC, and all of these protests are attacking the issue from the bottom up, starting with the police. And we need to work this situation from the top down. The bottom line is, if we keep pushing back against police and we leave our current laws and systems in place, we are turning the street back over to violent crime. This violent crime that we saw in the 1980s and the 1990s that made people cry out for greater police involvement in our communities. We don't want to return to that situation, so we have to solve the problem from the top to the bottom. So that's something we have to keep in mind. We have to keep poking at solutions at the top. We have to look at the death of Breonna Taylor and say, how did this happen? What policies led to this tragedy, and how do we actually fix it? So the other thing about NFAC for me is that it represents a further splintering of the country. There are Black Lives Matter protesters who say they're too extreme and we don't support them. Obviously, there are many members of the Black community that I've encountered personally through social media in particular that don't support the Black Lives Matter movement. They believe that movement is too divisive. Obviously, the white community is very divided over the Black Lives Matter movement. And I oppose all of this identity politics because as a libertarian, I understand that a population cannot stand against a powerful state divided. Only united can we get the kind of changes that we want to see, the real changes we want to see, ending the war on drugs, ending qualified immunity, ending the stop and frisk and the over-policing and all of these different things that we want to see go away have to happen from a united population standing against a state that is enforcing unconstitutional laws, that has over-militarized the police. We have to come together to do this. This is why I speak out against the movement of Black Lives Matter, and that I feel it would be a much more effective organization if they were racially inclusive, including looking at police brutality against whites and Hispanics and everyone in this country, because the more people we have on the side of that coalition, the stronger the voice is. I am an advocate against police brutality, but I refuse to be involved in identity politics, which is why I can't support the movement. I think that's what you're finding from a lot of opposition to Black Lives Matter is they oppose police brutality, but they want to make sure that the movement is inclusive. And realistically, that's the only way to bring about real change. So that's the first story that really popped out at me, was this NFAC story. I wanted to kind of address that. The second story is out of Reason Magazine, and it's a response to a CATO Institute poll. And it really strikes at the core of American values, in particular the First Amendment and freedom of speech. And I'm just going to read kind of the results of this article, or this poll is, when it comes to free expression, the fears cross partisan lines, writes CATO Director of Polling Emily Ekins. Majorities of Democrats, 52%, Independents, 59%, and Republicans, 77%, all agree they have political opinions they are afraid to share. Essentially, the poll was reaching out to determine whether or not people feel that they are safe to express their political views. And the majority of respondents across the board, all political parties, both left, right, and independent, are afraid to speak their minds. And I think this should be a concern to everyone that wants to improve political discourse in this country. One of the most disturbing things from this is that 44% of people under the age of 30 thought that if you donate to Donald Trump's campaign, you should be fired. That should be grounds for termination. And 27% of people under 30 on the Republican side felt the same way about giving money to Joe Biden's campaign. This is a massive number of young people in this country who genuinely oppose freedom of speech. There's no other way to put it. And I'm also very concerned when we talk about who runs cancel culture in this country. It's the far left. So one group in particular is silencing everyone. And this isn't moderate Democrats. These aren't reasonable Democrats. This is the far left. And so The reason I can say it's the far left specifically and not the alt-right is because how many people have the alt-right gotten fired? What is the alt-right's power in this country? They have none. They have no political clout, and they shouldn't. And I'm glad they don't. So the alt-right is a relatively powerless group of people that most of us would disregard. But the far left in this country controls cancel culture. They control social media. This is the pitchfork nation on Twitter that demands heads when something offends them and gets it. People are publicly making apologies for things that they said 10 years ago. People are being fired. People are being canceled. And it is the far left that's doing this, not the far right, and certainly not moderates. And they're silencing the voices of all the moderate people in this country, the people who would be willing to sit down at a table and have a conversation with each other. They're being silenced by the far left. And that's scary. These are the people who need to be making decisions. Reasonable people who are relatively moderate in their views and can listen to things that they don't necessarily agree with and engage in discourse are the people who need to be making decisions in this country. Now, their voices are being silenced, and that's scary. That's another article. It's from the Cato Institute. I'm going to put links to both articles in the description. I encourage you to go and read them. I think both of these things are very important. I think the situation in Louisville obviously bears a great deal of attention. And I also think that we all need to work together to make sure that we are engaging in political discourse and that we're making it safe and that we're fighting back against cancel culture in this country so that as a nation we can move forward and institute the kind of change that we need to be united in order to make. So I just wanted to drop this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Tomorrow we're going to be talking about whatever news kind of catches my eye today. And this is what I'm going to be trying to do on a daily basis is just get up, take a look at articles and see what really jumps out and have a conversation about those from a libertarian perspective. I'm also continuing through Thomas Sowell's Basic Economics. I will be posting a video about chapter 5 of that book and my thoughts on it and how it relates to today's what's going on in the nation today. I'm hoping I will have that video up by Friday. So again, please like and share the content. Subscribe if you haven't done so. Share the content. And again, thanks for stopping by. And as always, we will see you next time.